I'll close up so we don't have stereo.
Hi, Ozzy.
Hi, Ozzy.
Good afternoon. How are you?
Good. You look so bright and cheerful, and yeah, how's it going?
Everything is wonderful.
Good.
I'm on break, but I'm staying very, very busy.
You're on break. Okay.
But I'm popping in. I'm on break from school right now.
Okay. Right. Right.
Popping
Is it
and doing due diligence.
right? Right. Classes are over now, huh? That's fantastic. Good deal. So what courses do you teach?
I'm a student.
Good for you.
Yes.
I'm at Cal Berkeley.
Good for you. Good for you. What kind of courses are you taking?
I'm a media studies major. I'm about to graduate and I'll be going on for my master's and PhD. So
good for you.
I'm a late bloomer, but you know, I'm a living testament that it's never too late.
No, it's not. And I too was a late bloomer. I didn't start my doctorate. I think I was 41 when I started my PhD. And I felt a little out of sorts, but I very quickly found another woman who was my age. And we often joked that we were old enough to be everybody's mothers, but it was okay. It was really good. And what I learned is that my life experience actually made a huge difference in my engagement and the quality of my work. So that made it all the better.
Well, I
way to go. You rock it.
Thank you. I definitely concur. I am a grandmother. I'm from that era, you know, a boomer. And, you know, it's all good because definitely the wisdom that we bring kind of compensates for the articulations that the millennials bring to the table. But definitely we gain and garner our respect, but just that we hold space.
Good for you. Hi, Bill. Hi, Melissa. Hi, Jill. Hi, Melvin.
Hi. How's it going?
It's going.
Good.
How are things going for you?
That's good. Yeah. Busy as I'm sure everybody is.
Yeah, it is.
Afternoon.
Hi, Denise. Sorry, right when you said hi, my dog started barking.
Oh, no. Funny how dogs are. My dog started barking last night at 1 o'clock in the morning and wouldn't stop for 2.5 hours. So it was quite a long night, so to speak.
Was it fireworks related? Because that's when my dogs lose it.
Oh, no, we think it was skunk related.
Oh.
So she could smell it and she heard it, and fortunately she didn't get sprayed, but she certainly kept us up half the night. So, you know, what do you do?
It's a good thing she didn't get sprayed. We've had our dog get sprayed a couple times and it's brutal.
Oh yeah, we had a cat that got sprayed twice, 2 springs in a row, like 1 year, March, and then March of the following year. And I'm like, this little guy better learn that skunk is not one of his friends. So, oh, it's nasty, just so nasty.
Yeah. We were just waiting for one more voting member.
More? Okay. Melvin, are you going to sit in for the chief today, or shall I, since Patrice is out on vacation?
Knock yourself out.
Okay,
But I am here.
okay, great, thanks. Make sure I keep the right hat on.
Appreciate it.
While we're waiting for a quorum, Denise, I listened in on a Stepping Up webinar yesterday, and it was about, they shared some data, a lot of really good data. Did you happen to listen to that webinar yesterday?
No, I didn't.
I asked for the data because it talked about a lot of things that I think you would be excited about.
Oh, great, yeah.
It talked about, it was super interesting. They had some stats on the size of the police force, as in per capita, versus incarceration rates in different communities and counties. And one of the data points that they talked about is smaller police forces equated with higher amount of mental health services and lower incarceration rates. And I was really curious about that data. So I asked them to send us Contra Costa specific data on that.
Oh, great. Oh, please, I'd be really intrigued to see more about that. Who put that on? Stepping Up put that on?
Yeah, it was a Stepping Up webinar. I will send you the information on it because I probably will post it to the website so you can watch it after the fact.
That would be great. I'd really love to see that. That would be fantastic. Thank you. Do we have quorum yet, Nicole?
Unfortunately, we are just waiting for one more voting member.
Okay. Oh, we're waiting for Nick or Lynn,
Nick
who's going to
or-
chair.
Shayla or LaShante.
Right, and I thought Becky had said that Nick or Lynn would be here on her behalf to chair.
Yes,
Okay.
I did forward the invite to them, so they have the information, but.
Okay.
And Shayla's here.
Oh, there she is.
Hi, Shayla.
Hi, everybody.
We have quorum now.
Okay, but we don't have somebody to chair.
I'm not sure what the protocol is, if you have to vote someone in to do that, or someone volunteers.
Bill, I'm sorry to ask you, do you have any suggestions, given that we don't have a chair here?
I think the group can just decide who wants to lead the meeting.
Okay. Well, I suggest Chris,
Denise,
since
go
you,
ahead.
oh, go ahead, Bill.
Denise, go ahead.
All right. I will accept that if there's no objections. Okay, well, why don't we go ahead then and convene the meeting at 3:05. Does anybody have any announcements or introductions to make?
I'm anxious to see if Jill can help us interpret the Board of Supervisors meeting from Tuesday on going in person, but.
Happy to, if you want me to take the time to do it now.
Yeah, if anything that would impact this group specifically, convening in person.
Yeah,
would be
so
helpful.
the Board of Supervisors are going to continue to meet virtually into September. I think I can't remember what the date is in September. It's prior to the September 30th expiration of the, I think
it was
it's
September
September
14th.
7th. Yeah, September 14th. I think they might be meeting. Yeah, their September 7th is the last remote meeting. And then the first in-person meeting will be September 14th. And so basically the Brown Act allows for anybody to participate virtually or via phone, as long as there's a quorum of the body in the room. And then other people can call in or virtually Zoom in. I know that the Board of Supervisors are encouraging continued opportunities for the public to do virtual, both virtual public comments as well as phone-in comments during their board meetings. And have directed all staff to the advisory bodies to work with the county IT department to determine what rooms can be used so that those accommodations can be met with, or that IT can develop systems in whatever places that advisory bodies are meeting to, I'm sorry, I'm trying to get away from my dogs who all of a sudden started barking. To work with the IT department to get whatever spaces that you're meeting in to be able to do those virtual meetings, or hybrid meetings rather. But the bottom line is the Brown Act does allow for it as long as the quorum of the body is in the room. So that's starting in the current emergency order that allows for total virtual meetings expires September 30th.
You said September 30th? Yeah.
Yes, September 30th, and we don't know whether or not the governor is going to extend that or not, but we know for sure that the current order extends through September 30th. That allows for 100% virtual.
Okay.
Great, thank you, Jill. I really appreciate that. Nick, we did convene the meeting before you arrived, but now that you're here, I'm happy to turn over the chair role to you because I understand that you, I got a heads up from Becky that you would be joining us. And so,
yes, so I have to, so thank you, Denise. Becky asked me to join. I didn't come knowing I was going to chair. So we'll probably have a better meeting if somebody else chairs.
Okay, I'm happy to continue.
Okay, and I'm sorry for that miscommunication.
No worries. It's pretty straightforward this week, so we'll just go ahead and proceed. And while you were coming on board, Jill was just giving us an update on the Board of Supervisors' decision about opening up and meetings and what the impact that has on the Brown Act for us.
Good. Thank you.
Anyway, are there any other public comments on items under the jurisdiction of the R job and not on this agenda? Okay. Can I get an approval or a motion for the approval of the record of action from last month?
So moved.
Can I get a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Melissa. Thank you, Bill. Nicole, would you like to get a roll call vote, please?
Sure. Nick?
That's an
You
aye.
shake your head yes, but you're on, you are
Okay.
on mute. Melissa,
Yes.
Denise,
Yes.
Dr. Walker,
Yes.
Shayla,
Yes.
motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you. The next item is discussion surrounding the data request presentation for the upcoming mayor's conference meeting. And I have a couple of updates on that topic prior to going through the kind of the draft presentation that Patrice and I worked on together. And the first update is that Patrice has not yet received confirmation for the August 5th date for the mayor's conference. There has been a little bit of confusion surrounding that. We're not sure if it's going to take place in August or September, but we're proceeding as if it is August, but we're still waiting. The other piece of information is that we or she has not received confirmation from either Chief French or from Tamisha as to whether or not they will present this information or present our data request. And she has reached out several times. There has been no response. There was also a request for both of them to attend this meeting with the notion that if they were going to be willing to make the presentation, that ORJ is happy to make modifications and do the lift on the presentation itself. But if they were here, then we could get that input from them in this discussion, make the changes, and it would be ready to go for final review at next month's meeting. But at this point, we don't have a confirmed date for the conference presentation, and we do not have confirmed speakers. So I would suggest that this body, at some point start thinking about, well, if we don't have the co-chairs from the overall body who are willing to do this, who would be candidates for presentation in a backup role? So just want to put that out there. I don't know that a decision needs to be made today, but we can certainly discuss that further next month since we have some time, particularly if the conference presentation gets put off until September. Are there any questions on that before we go through the presentation? Okay, I'm going to share my screen here and I think it's on page, what is it, 5 is the start of the presentation. Let's see. Okay. Can everybody see this? Okay, so basically what happened with this was that I asked Chris for his original slides that were presented at the, was it the police chiefs meeting? I believe it was. And I worked with that based upon the other conversations that the data subcommittee had. And then Patrice really did some other magic to it. So this is basically an effort from the both of us on this. And we've got 15 slides. The other thing we don't yet know is how long we would get at this meeting for presentation, but this was basically intended to be a broad overview of oversight body as well as the tasks that the oversight body was commissioned to perform under the RJTF and how far we've come, as well as what our remaining obstacles are, wrapped up with finally what is our ask. So that's where we are. Obviously, the date of the meeting and the presenters are going to need to change here. So this is the overview slide. And actually, if everybody, I would not mind if you stopped me on any page that you see that looks kind of off, because I'm talking and I want to be able to write and take notes too. So if you have suggestions or comments, please stop me and I'll take notes as we're working on the slide, because I'll be responsible for updating it. Okay. All right, so this is the overview. Again, this is basically what is our job, what is the mission and the work to date, where are we going, and what are our specific data related tasks as well as needs. And then more specifically, what is our oversight body data ask of the mayors? So this is a brief about the our job, that it was established in 2018 following the adoption of the Racial Justice Task Force and the recommendations for improving racial equity within the county's criminal justice system. And then it speaks about the task force met monthly to review local data and to basically assess the best emerging practices for disparities. And this is, here is the brief that speaks to the task force findings that was presented to the Board of Supervisors in July, that summarizes the disparities within the local justice system here. And this includes data that was provided by local law enforcement agencies and criminal and juvenile justice partners in the county. So here we see the higher arrests. I don't think I need to read through all of this for this committee, because I think you know all of this. But that's basically what this is speaking to, is the highlighting of the findings and what we know about the disparities that exist in our county. This is a graphic that represents many of those findings, that speaks to the race data in the county's justice systems. It includes basically the census estimate of the distribution of the population in the county, is so that you have a baseline measure against which you can compare for determination of a disparity. It includes juries, as well as adult probation, juvenile probation, pretrial, and criminal cases. And again, this is data that came prior to the establishment of this body, but during the work that took place under the task force. So the final recommendations from the task force included these key domains of oversight and accountability, and under that domain was the formation of the oversight body, diversion, data, support for local law enforcement agencies, community engagement and services, practices related to trial and adjudication, as well as confinement. And so this was the domains that were related to these 18 recommendations that came out of the task force and the final report that went to the board. So the Our Job's mission, in adherence to the task force oversight and accountability recommendation, or Our Job is the Our Job, was to prioritize the task force recommendations, establish subcommittees of Our Job members who bring their expertise and commitment to a particular topic area, and to develop subcommittee work plans and prioritization of those plans. The full body meets quarterly currently and reports to the Board of Supervisors on an annual basis, where subcommittees meet on a monthly basis. This graphic points to the overall goals and objectives of each of the 3 subcommittees, of which there's a community engagement and funding subcommittee, the data subcommittee, as well as the diversion subcommittee. And again, I think this is pretty detailed and I don't need to go through that with you here. One of the things from my perspective, as a former professor, I think this is a bit busy, but I would, for you as an audience, does this make sense? And you can give me your sense and feedback once we're done with this, but I think this is a lot on one slide, personally. These are the activities and accomplishments to date for each of those subcommittees. And here's an example of some of the collected data. And this, you'll recognize that this is a graphic that I prepared previously from the DOJ data via the Open Justice source link. This is for adults in felony arrests. What I did was I added horizontal lines by color that represent the percentage of that group within the general population. So for example, the African-American population is the green bar, and the horizontal green line is just below 10%, which indicates that it's at 9%. So you can clearly see the disparity, but you need to look a little more carefully, but that was the easiest way that I could incorporate that in here. The Latinx too is about 26%. My bar looks a little bit low, but it gives you a general idea of that the Latinx population for adult felonies is about comparable to their distribution in the general population. And then the white population is 42%. And as you can see, the graphic shows that they're substantially lower in their distribution for felony arrests. So the idea here is to show that we have collected some data. We continue to see disparities across adult felony arrests. And this is the other example that it's not just adults, it's also very present in juveniles. So this speaks to our future directions. The work plans for the R job were developed and approved for a 2-year period of time. We are currently in our 2nd year, and while we've made inroads towards a good number of the goals and objectives, there are some areas that need some further development, including an increased capacity for diversion, reentry, and other alternatives to incarceration with collaboration with our CBOs. Creating a community capacity fund to provide resources to the community and expand our reentry services, and ensuring collection and reporting of accurate current data in all criminal justice and law enforcement agencies countywide. As your job continues to request data and commend those who share it, develop the Youth Advisory Council, and propose changes to diversion and other alternatives countywide, we continue to center community in order to make significant shifts within the county to achieve true partnership between justice systems and community stakeholders. So that just points to what our values are, I think, in making these requests. And this is our, data specific work and needs. What I want to say, the recommendation that came from the task force surrounding this, that all Contra Costa County criminal justice agencies and law enforcement agencies shall collect individual level data on all individual encounters with criminal and juvenile justice systems and processes. So this is a direct quote from the recommendation of the task force. In doing so, they should consult best practices to balance data needs with confidentiality regulations. That the part B of this recommendation is that all agencies shall improve capacity for data collection and analysis, including expanding staff with data analysis capabilities. So our job, our subcommittee is specifically looking to support the collection and reporting of accurate data in all the criminal justice and law enforcement agencies. And while we have access to some data, and the data from the DOJ is an important supplement to that data, that data is limited, particularly from the standpoint that it does not include stop data. And while we can obtain arrest data from the sheriff's office and the DOJ, we are not able to collect stop data. And with RIPA moving forward, it will be several years before we are able to obtain that data from individual law enforcement agencies or from the Department of Justice on a broader scale. So that data will not be available from all police departments for several years. So this slide is what I would put back on this committee to say, our ask of you as mayors in, the county, what do you want to ask of them? What do we want? What data points do we want? From who? And what is the suggested frequency? We discussed last month that monthly data reporting is too onerous, certainly for probation. And Melissa was pretty clear in that it's too onerous as well for the sheriff's office. So how often do we want that? And what kind of questions do we expect to have answered by this data? How are we going to use it? And what solutions would we like to see to be informed by the collection of these data? These are just some of the things to think about as we frame our ask. So, you guys are awful silent over there.
Denise, one of my thoughts is, and this is just initial thoughts, is you had a slide that, or a couple slides that had some example data, but maybe even providing as another handout or attachment, some of the data that you've generated for the juvenile arrest data, because that really gives a good visual for what I believe the subcommittee is requesting. So, here's an example of what we're currently collecting for juveniles, and this is what we are also requesting from your cities for adults. That's one thought.
Okay, so I hear you saying that the data that probation provides would be a good model to say, this is what we're looking from your agency.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's one of the thoughts that I had.
Okay. So that data, okay, that's great.
I know it is quite a bit of information to give them, but that if you want to compare sort of apples to apples between both adults and juveniles, that would be a good visual to say, this is what we are trying to build, is the same information for adults throughout the county. And it requires collaboration with all of the different cities and county in order to obtain similar information for adults.
Okay. Okay, that's great input. Thanks, Melissa. So would you suggest that we take out these two slides from the DOJ and present, or in addition to?
I'm thinking in addition to, I actually really like those slides a lot. I think there's
I do too.
good visual with the baselines. Especially, it does take a little bit of explanation, but once you explain it, I like those graphs a lot. So I would, and I don't know that I would put all the juvenile data into the PowerPoint presentation, but maybe as a supplement. Do we know if this meeting is virtual or in person?
We don't know that yet either.
So either as an attachment or an actual handout during the meeting, if it is in person.
Yeah, I was going to suggest that if in fact the meeting has an agenda with a packet ahead of time, like ours do, that I think all the information in here is good, but in doing the PowerPoint presentation, the presenter doesn't necessarily need to go over or read everything.
Right.
But can go through the slides and hit the high points, depending upon how much time is available, which we probably still don't know.
No, we don't.
But I think all the information is good. And in this context, particularly if it's included in the packet, it may work better to make sure that everybody at least has it in their hands. I'm not sure.
Right.
I'm not sure how handouts work, particularly virtually, if the meeting is going to be virtual. So,
Right.
so that, yeah. As with regard to the questions that need to be asked, I guess that obviously the juvenile data is pretty well formulated from probation, but I'm wondering once we get data from the sheriff's office, with regard to arrest, confinement, et cetera, how much of that data is actually overlapping with what the cities have? And I don't know what the answer to that is. And that kind of begs the question of what exactly we're asking each of the police departments in the county to provide individually.
Exactly.
And
Oh.
I can speak just to the sheriff's office data. So what I had mentioned last meeting about the data on our website, it is booking data, but it is only booking data for sheriff's office and our contract cities. So we would be asking for that same arrest and booking information from the other cities' police departments.
Got it.
Okay.
That needs to be clear in what our request is then,
Yeah, I would agree. Okay. So that's one ask, right, of the arrest and the booking data. What we don't have, and we have arrest records, and I'm trying to think if we get booking data from DOJ too. Can't remember if we do or not. But basically, we would also want the stop data as well. And that's what we don't have either yet through DOJ or through any agency. And Melissa, you've mentioned that the sheriff's office is collecting it, but we're not collecting it, or you're not collecting it independently of the state. And so that then needs to wait until DOJ releases it before we can access it, which means it's a year behind. And given that we have other arrest and disposition data from DOJ that is a year behind, do we want to wait, or do we want some of the other smaller law enforcement agencies to start collecting that data now?
So a little update on the RIPA data, because last time I said I wanted to look at the other dates so I could provide everyone with the timeline for when agencies are required to start collecting RIPA data. So we started January of this year. So that means our report for 2021 will not be available until, I believe it's around April of 2022. And
Okay.
that's we fell into the timeframes are based upon sworn staff size. And so we fell in the category of between 334 and 667 sworn officers. So there's one more group, or wave 4, which is everybody below 334 officers, which is going to include, I don't know how many officers all of our agencies in the county have, but I'm going to assume that is pretty much the rest of our police departments. They will start collecting data January of 2022. So their reports will be available in the spring of 2023. So by spring of 2023, we should have RIPA data for all of the agencies. And CHP was in the first wave. So they have been reporting their data out since 2018, I believe, because they fell into
The large.
a large group.
Yeah.
So my opinion is you can ask for stop data. Why not ask for it? And they may have a similar response that we have in the sheriff's office. Hey, we're collecting it, just wait till it comes out in the report. But you can certainly ask for it, and some of the agencies may agree to provide it earlier.
Yeah, I would agree. I don't think that it hurts to ask. And we can start with that and see where we go.
Denise, I just wanted to jump in. I looked up the mayor's conference, and the next one is August 5th, and Richmond is the host city.
Okay.
And they said the deadline for the agenda packet is July. Hold on, let me look at the printable agenda. I mean, that's not the next one, but that's the August 5th. So the deadline for the next agenda is July 21st. And they do have agendas posted online and packets.
Okay. Oh, that's good to know. Okay.
They're downloadable. And it still says Zoom.
Okay, great. I will, Patrice has been in contact with the individual who's coordinating those meetings. And I think there's likely agenda that's in place, and they're trying to navigate whether or not there's time for this or not. So I think that's maybe where the issue is. Again, I'm not certain because Patrice hasn't received much in the way of response yet. So we'll
Okay,
follow
I'm
up.
happy to reach out to Gary Picorni because we did reach out last time and they confirmed that our JOB was already on the August agenda. So I'm happy to just
Oh, great.
double check
Okay.
that. So
Okay, you know what I would suggest, Jill, before you do that, check with Patrice on Monday, if you wouldn't mind, or I will, let me follow up with her on Monday and let her know that you're happy to do that and see, because something could have come in this week while she's been on vacation. And I would hate for it to be a redundant sort of overload for Gary, but yeah, we just hadn't received, our office hadn't received confirmation yet.
That
Okay.
was the contact for our office as well. So she's been working with him and yeah, it wasn't someone different. It was him. So,
Well, and Jill, if you're saying that you have confirmation that it's August 5th in Richmond, well, then we have, that's as good of information as we have. So I will certainly work through making the suggested changes that have come forward. And certainly incorporating as best I can some examples from the probation data. And certainly, Melvin, are you still on the line?
I am.
Oh, hey. So how do you feel about probation sharing some of our data points with the mayor's conference for this meeting?
I'd probably have to run it by the chief. I mean, I know we've been
Okay.
sharing it with this committee, and I'm sure she'll be fine with it, but I'll send her a text.
Okay.
Of, some data points.
Okay, and certainly what I'll do is I'll run them past you, but yeah, I think we do need to get her approval before we move forward with sending it to the mayor's conference, and I will pull together some things that make sense to do that. And if there's anything that we don't want to present, just let me know, but
Okay,
that's great. Okay, thanks,
good.
Melvin.
Yep.
Cheryl, I see your hands up.
Yes. Yeah. So I was waiting till you guys finish your discussion
Okay.
before I say something, but yeah, the data itself is fine. I think it's good. The slides are good. I'm more concerned about how this is being presented. How's it going to be presented? What's the spirit, the tenor, how's it going to be presented? Because it's one thing to slap a bunch of slides up on the screen and to read them off or to say it in a monotone way. And it's another thing to give it some passion and to tell them
Exactly.
why we're there and to give it, as I said before, this is not the same thing as speaking to the Board of Supervisors or to the Sheriff's Association. These are mayors who have a different responsibility to their constituents. I was glad to see yesterday the Measure X meeting, the mayor from Concord, the mayor from Walnut Creek, especially him, the one from Walnut Creek, give a very impassioned endorsement to a non-police response to our effort in the name of Miles Hall. And another endorsement came from the city of Concord, and there was about 20, 25 other letters from other cities endorsing what we're looking for in this regard. But he verbally spoke at the meeting with some passion. So the mayors from these cities who wrote these letters on behalf of their city will be at this mayor's conference. About a third of them wrote the letter, 2/3. The only ones missing were from East County. And I say this because typically when people get up and you start reading things, and these mayor conferences are notorious for putting people to sleep. So I would say that there's too many people in the racial justice oversight body who have a lot of passion for what we do, whether it's in the community or who work for the county in any capacity, to be going there and just reading slides.
Absolutely.
Or going there and just reiterating talking points. So
Right.
I was hoping that today we would get a glimpse into what this was going to, what kind of, not just the asking questions, but they ask in intent, right? And what kind of impact we are hoping to make at these events. Because the impact we make is just as important as the slides and the handouts that are going to be given. So what is the impact we are hoping to make? And what is it we hope to walk away with? Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl. I agree completely. This is, Patrice and I were both very much hoping that Bisa and Tamisha would be willing to take this on. And we thought that we had their buy-in, but in confirmation, we haven't. So we can only expect that we don't have their buy-in. In light of that, then this committee is then tasked with, well, who will present it and who does have that buy-in? Who has the buy-in and the passion to speak about this in a way that carries that zest, and yeah, passion is the best word. Who in this body does that is willing to take it on? And who's a good representative from this committee?
Well, I recommend Cheryl.
So I guess I just have a question. So when we're talking Bisa and Tamisha, is it because they're the chair of the overarching RJOB?
Yes.
And so it's for me.
And I would say they're the chair of the overall body, or the co-chairs of the overall body. But the other is that Bisa is the chief of law enforcement agency in the county, and Tamisha is a council member. And so both of those other roles have, we're part of the decision.
No, totally understand that. And I think the point that I was going to make was, having someone from the subcommittee, in my opinion, is totally different than the chair and the co-chair of the overarching body to go represent of what it is, because it's not the subcommittee that's going to speak for the entire RJOB, as the chair and co-chair should be speaking for the data subcommittee, all the work that the RJOB is doing and all the other subcommittees. So it's a uniform sort of universal language and message of, hey, this is what this is all about, and this is what we need to do. It's, and I'll just say for me, it's extremely, I'll just say frustrating that, you know, the amount of work that's going into this, the severity, the sincerity of it all, and we don't have the chair or the co-chair here. When we talked about at the last meeting, hey, you guys come, we want to get this together, we want to get it fine-tuned, so we're all on the same page, and that's not happening. And
Right.
so if they don't come to the next one, or if they even do come to the next one, and to Cheryl's point is, how can they exude the passion that this committee has if they're not here to listen to this committee and listen to this passion of what we would like to see be presented in the tenure and the space at the conference. And so, like I said, I'm frustrated because I think, you know, this is really a golden opportunity to push forward a lot of stuff and talks to the accountability that I talked about the last time with each law enforcement agency and everybody in the county as we try to do something different.
I hear you, Melvin, and I would take it a step further. I'm not just frustrated, I'm deeply disappointed. And, you know, what are your suggestions? You know, I know Patrice has reached out at least twice, and, you know, we can
See,
bring.
and I hear Patrice, you know, reaching out, but I think everybody who's participating on every subcommittee and everyone that this is important to should be reaching out to Tamisha and to Chief French, however, through email, phone calls, or whatever, to say, hey, this is a priority for us. If you guys, you know, if you don't want to embrace it, just let us know. And then we have another conversation of, hey, how do we move forward? But I think it shouldn't just be Patrice as the one that's doing it. I think it should be everyone who is passionate about this and wants to see it happen should be making those phone calls and emails and the contacts.
Good. How are you? No.
You got hurt out there?
Oh, Cheryl, you're on. You might want to mute yourself.
Sorry, I'm in the doctor's office.
I think that's a great idea, Melvin. I think we have some marching orders. Everybody should think about emailing French and Tamisha. And maybe we can get some of the other subcommittee members as well to do that. And Nicole, we can consider putting this on the agenda for the other subcommittees. Do we have agreement on that from everybody? Does everybody think that's a good idea moving forward?
Sounds like a good idea to me. I would just throw out there that we share in your frustration, Melvin. Like everyone who's been, like I've been copied on the emails that Patrice sent, and like looked at them like 3 times. Like, I'm copied on this. Was there something I was supposed to do, or are we trying to get them to respond? Okay, nothing really for me to do here. Just trying to get responses from them. So we share in the frustration. I think one of the things we have to think about as we take on this this sort of push is, do we think we can resolve this in time to make the August 5th meeting that we're on the agenda for, or, you know, does it look like, and I shudder to even say it, but does it look like, you know, we want to try to push back to a later meeting? Obviously, we wouldn't want to do that. That wouldn't be an ideal situation. It's just a matter of if we're sort of finalizing the tangibles in terms of what the information is, as well as, you know, trying to make sure that we're striking the right chord not just the gravitas of the speakers, but the speakers bringing the right tone and approach. Next month's data subcommittee meeting will be enough to sort of get us there. And so I don't have an answer to that question. It's just something that I think we need to think about, because we don't have a chance to necessarily convene another quarterly meeting, right, to have everyone vote or weigh in or something like that. And I think part of that is taken care of, so to speak, with the subcommittee meetings in between, and having those conversations. It's just going to take up until about this time next month, right, before we're, there. So just something to think about. And I think I think part of the question that Denise, asked in response was like, what do we do? Who should we nominate then, right? Because this is coming up. So that's all. And I know that, sorry, I'm just seeing the chat. They're actually part of the diversity subcommittee, invited to join this meeting. Yeah, that's right. So just something to think about in terms of timing, right? The turnaround is going to be quicker than,
Well, and Chris, and the other thing, I just turned around to look at my calendar. Our next data subcommittee meeting is the day after the agenda packet is due for the mayor's conference. So we either, it sounds to me like we need to put this off to September, because we will not have a final package for the agenda packet by the 21st. And we need to iron out all these other details.
I agree. I think if we're going to, we have to make this our best shot. So if we're uneasy about making the August 5th deadline and have no commitments from who the presenters are, I think that the best thing is to defer.
Yeah, and I should just remind you that that Ms. Bisa and Christopher, you may remember the dates. Ms. Bisa said that she would not make the next two diversion subcommittee meetings because she's going to be on vacation in July and then again in August, or she would be out of town. So I don't know if there's during that August 5th date or not. I don't know, but I do know she said she would be out of town.
Okay, that's good to know. Thanks, Cheryl. So maybe September works better all the way around.
Well, I didn't say that, but
No, I hear you.
What I said was, she said she'd be out of town in July or August, but I do think it is imperative that you get a response one way or the other for a commitment to actually speak at this mayor's conference, and that you confirm the speakers right away so that you can start prepping them, because to Melvin's point, they need to be coming to this meeting.
Yeah. Okay. Any other thoughts or comments on this? I'm just making a note that we're halfway through our meeting time and we have another kind of hefty discussion topic from the community listening session from the SEEP subcommittee. So if there are no other comments surrounding the mayor's conference presentation, I'll just make a note of what we have moving forward, and we'll go from there. Discuss it again at the next meeting.
Don't we have to make a decision about deferring or not if we're not going to be meeting until after?
Well, I don't know that it was a firm decision to go for August. Do we need to vote? Jill, do we need to vote on this?
I don't know about voting, but I mean, August 5th was the date that was pre-selected. Yeah, right. I mean, that was confirmed in May by the mayor's conference. So, I don't know that you need a vote, but you know, maybe a conversation with Patrice.
And Becky, okay. Bill, does that work for you?
I'm okay either way. Yeah.
Okay, okay. All right. Our next, or am I supposed to add, are there any comments from the public surrounding this? Do we have any members of the public who would like to provide some input on this? Okay, I am now going to turn things over to Christopher James, who is going to walk us through our discussion on community listening sessions with the CEF subcommittee.
Thank you. So, all right, Cheryl is gonna listen as much as she can. But it's fitting that I start this off mentioning Cheryl, right? Cheryl, I think the last meeting had this idea of, you know, as we're talking about collecting and reporting data, how about we have a listening session to share some of that data with the public? The Community Engagement and Funding Subcommittee has already held a listening session before, you know, literally just to hear from people about race and justice and what, you know, what issues were coming up for them, you know, what sorts of work or what sorts of changes they wanted to see, or what types of things they would want, the public, that is, would want members of the RJLB to know, to inquire about, to be able to inform them about. So done that in the past. As we're talking about securing, collecting, reporting data, Cheryl says it would be a great idea if we could collect some data and share it with the community in a listening session, right? First of all, of course, to share the information with them, but second, to get their impressions, right? That's where the listening comes in for this group. What are your impressions? What are your takeaways in terms of this data? What questions do you have? What sorts of things do you want to know? Not only in terms of what the data shows and the analysis as far as the work that we have to do to promote greater racial equity in the county, but also how accessible is this data? How understandable and digestible is this data to you as a member of the public? Does it make sense? Does it look like something that you can decipher on your own, or, you know, are there ways that we can make it better or sort of user-friendly, right, for people to see what that data shows? Also, and despite my best efforts, Denise, I regret to inform you, I have not been able to get any concrete answers on this question. But also, if the data were to be shared in a public space, such as a website, right, or even, you know, on social media accounts, where should those be? What would be the easiest places for you to remember, for you to be able to click through, to view it, right, and to see it, to look at it whenever you have an inquiry or a question. These are questions that, you know, it makes all the sense in the world to present to the public, to present to the community, to get their insight on. And so we put on the agenda for the Community Engagement and Funding Subcommittee to have a conversation about holding a listening session for that purpose. I don't think any of you will be surprised at all. The Community Engagement and Funding Subcommittee was really interested in the idea. It is something that they absolutely want to do. And in fact, not only do they want to do it, but we began to have a conversation about the level of data that we could present, right? The level of trends that we might be able to show, the level of analysis that might be able to be done, and the picture that folks could get in terms of where the county justice system is in terms of racial equity. And so the chair, Jeff Landau, he goes back onto the public agendas website and finds the old racial justice task force data, right? Which was more comprehensive just in terms of timing. It wasn't quarterly, it was, over some years. There were some trends there. If I'm not mistaken, and this is attachment 3 in your agenda, if I'm not mistaken, what we found is that the sources for every different sort of set are listed on the sheet. So it says where the data came from, but I think we determined that the county administrator's office had compiled this for the Racial Justice Task Force. For those of you who may have participated in those meetings, it won't be anything you hadn't seen before. I'll just share my screen here. But this is what we're talking about. So see attachment 3, it says sources, census, probation department, and Contra Costa Superior Court. What you're looking at here is very similar to what you just saw toward the end of the presentation, right? And it may well be where it came from, because I remember Patrice saying, hey, I think we might want to use some of this, right? And so just looking at what is available, having some conversations along the lines of the talks that we've had here, right? In terms of how difficult sometimes it can be to get data, and people looking at this and saying, no, we should be able to get it, right? Like it probably shouldn't be. I mean, obviously there are logistics to be figured out, but this is doable, right? And we've seen something along this line before. So here, second page, this is just population data, source listed there. And as we move forward, criminal cases, source, court criminal case management system. So part of the question is, to what extent can we replicate something like this, right? And to what extent does it sort of get at a lot of the information that we want and that we would be making individual asks about? Because it certainly seems, at least, that if this was done once with a Racial Justice Task Force, that this should be something that could be replicated or updated for purposes of sharing, say, at a listening session, just to talk people through and give them some sense, at a high level, looking at years or trends as opposed to, a few months worth of data, which is also important. And we talked about why that's also important to do. But if we're going to have a listening session, and probably we're not going to have them every quarter, probably we're not going to have them, every month or other month, right? Or something like that, being able to show them some of this longer term data that has been compiled in a similar fashion to what you see before you. So that is the conversation that we had. And essentially what came out of that is that the Community Engagement and Funding Subcommittee definitely wants to have a listening session. They have yet to attempt to schedule it because they want to give some amount of time to see what we can develop, what we can put together, so that we make it worth the public's while. If people are going to show up, right? We actually have something to show them. And the conversation then turned to, well, how could we replicate this level of information sort of all in one place, like we've had in the past. So I'll pause there and stop my screen share if there are any questions.
Chris, I think it might be your mic that is sending, like, I don't know if anybody else is hearing it. What sounds like a wind blowing through.
My
sounds like a
fan is
fan.
on. I'm trying not to sweat on camera. It is hot.
I sent
Oh,
you a private text and was like, "Is your fan on?"
okay. Oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah, I feel your pain. Okay, that makes sense. Well, going back to the listening session, I think it's a great idea to share with the public, some of the findings we have, but I'm not sure what exact findings and what the purpose of it is. I'm a little unclear, aside from sharing and being transparent about what we have. And there are a lot of different kinds of analyses or data that can be presented. And I wonder more specifically what the pointed purpose of what specifically we want to share with them, other than what was already created.
Yeah, so I think those are, you know, this is the forum to have those questions, right? Similar to the same discussion that we're having about mayors' conferences and things like that. You know, and I think part of this is to the extent that you have members of the public in meetings like this, right? If you were going to attend a listening session, what sort of data would you want to see? You know, as well as this group, based on the information that is available to it, or the information that we're working so hard to collect, what makes sense on our end to share, and how best to present it and make sense of it, right? So those are the right conversations to have. But there was great interest, again, at the Community Engagement Funding Subcommittee meeting in sharing. I mean, probably you wouldn't want to share all of that in one session. It'd be a lot to talk people through, especially if you're supposed to get them to react to it in some way, or at least hear some feedback from folks. So we would want to narrow down a few sort of overarching, probably data sets that help tell, you know, a decent story, at least, of where we currently are, and maybe where we want to be, and then hearing from the community on both of those points. So that hasn't been finalized on either end. I think, first of all, folks, particularly folks who may not have experienced the Racial Justice Task Force, were in awe of the level of data that was available. Like, wait a minute, this has been done? Like, this is possible? Because we seem to be getting more pushback and running into more roadblocks and obstacles than that. But I definitely think the remaining conversations can be, you know, to what extent do we want to pull something like this sort of task force data? To what extent do we want to show people something more recent? And how do we isolate the top 2 or 3, you know, sort of images or graphs to get the most out of that conversation without sort of overload or confusion?
I wonder, as you were talking and thinking about telling a story, Chris, the thing that came to my mind was, does it make sense to draw on the decision points matrix rather than going into the nuts and bolts of, say, jury selection and pretrial services, but for the population to keep it up at a higher level of just criminal justice involvement that, you know, surrounding bookings and arrests, surrounding dispositions, surrounding outcomes as it relates to probation, things along those lines, as maybe a half a dozen or less points that we can tell a story on, and that story is the trajectory of the involvement at a higher level.
Yeah, I would want to hear from committee members, those of you with and stuff, about how you feel about it. But I think I would point out 2 things. I think it would be a good idea potentially to start with a sort of overarching look. And I would just remind everyone that particularly in the spirit of transparency, right, this does not have to be the last or only session, right? So you can start at a high level and then get some feedback from participants in terms of what they would want to see next, and try to schedule another one of these at some point in the future. And that might be a good way to go. I think the thing about doing this work is sounds a little bleak to say, but I don't mean it in that way. It never ends, right? You should always be monitoring this. And so if that's what we're going to be doing on an ongoing basis, right, then there should be opportunity to continue the conversation.
This is Shayla here. I do agree that we should do a session for sure. One, because we haven't had a community session in a while, and it would be just good to present the information that we've gotten so far, whether it be from probation or anything like that. And like Chris just mentioned, like this isn't like the end. Like we can definitely have do like the overarching things and then have deeper conversations. And it will be good just to, one, education is key, but also to get feedback, because a lot of, well, I'm not gonna say a lot of this information, but some of this information community don't know about. And I think it's really important to really figure out where we're gonna house this stuff. And I know we've had that conversation before. But how easy will it be to access it, and how often will it be updated, so that folks can also, keep track and see what's going on for like full transparency. And that's kind of my thoughts around it. But I do think it's a good idea and it's needed.
Thanks, Shayla. I see Emmylou, I see your hand up.
Yeah, and I don't know, I know I'm not officially part of the committee. I'm here as a representative of the public. So maybe Jill's in the committee. Should I talk or let Jill talk first?
Go ahead, please.
Okay. I am all for the idea as being a member of the public. Something I try to come to these meetings whenever possible, and something that always strikes me is how, in spite of it being via Zoom, there's still such little public representation. So I'm very for the transparency and getting the information about data out there. Having said that, I've also wondered when attending these meetings whether or not this committee has had the conversation as to when enough is enough, because there can be data overload, and I'm all for data collection because it leads to more nuanced analyses, and I'm all for data-driven decision-making. But I also know that the Haywards-Earn Institute made the recommendation right after George Floyd's murder for some real brave policy and practice changes now. And I'm just wondering, like, I feel like I don't think anyone here could argue that there are glaring racial disparities in the data that we already have. And so at what point will this committee say, okay, now we need to make recommendations, and then continue to collect data to continue to be, make data-driven decision makings with regard to policy. But that's my, I guess, as a member of the public who's been attending these meetings, I just wonder, when do we stop talking and really start the action?
Fair enough. Thank you. Jill, I see your hand.
Well, I want to make sure that none of the other committee members want to speak before I give my 2 cents.
Well, I'll speak particularly with regard to the last, really important input from a community member, and that is that, I'm not sure how complicated the data is. I mean, the data really, as was said, really speaks to an overwhelming racial disparity all through the criminal justice system. And I think the more detailed we get, the more detail the data is going to be to point out the same thing. So I think the real question is, so tee the data up. I mean, tee what we have, tee it in ways that are understandable to the community, and ask for input also, which we should be asking ourselves is, okay, we have the data, now what do we do? How do we fix it? How do we resolve the ongoing racial disparity in the criminal justice system, which is what this body was all about originally? I think I totally agree. I think we can get too deep into data and bury ourselves with it. And really, the stuff we have to demonstrate is not that complicated.
I would just jump in here really quick to say that I also agree with what you guys are saying. I think you're correct, and certainly the Burns Institute calling for action. I think for this particular group, especially this particular subcommittee, right, which deals with data, we're kind of always going to be having questions about sort of the nuts and bolts and numbers in a way that, say, a diversion subcommittee where recommendations are currently in working draft form for how to make some changes or improvements to diversion, right? That's an ongoing process right now. It just is not something that would happen in a data subcommittee meeting. Beyond that, I would say, I think one of the things that I'm still looking for in terms of data, plus things forward, much in the way that you are mentioning now, is offense types, right? Like what sorts of things can we move forward on where we know, like so we know that there's this overarching disparity, right? And we know that we need to do something, but how do we figure out where we want to pinpoint those efforts or where we want to prioritize them, because we can't necessarily do it all at once. So figuring out what sorts of offense types or what sorts of policies or practices have the most potential or opportunity for change or address. And that's where the data-informed decision-making comes in. But generally, yeah, you're absolutely correct. And I think if we can just get a handle on sort of quantifying offense data and geographic location data in ways that say, let's do something different in this particular place where, you know, this trend is occurring, or with this particular offense type where we see an overrepresentation and we think, you know, there may be the opportunity to do something else. That's what gives us the direction to actually make a specific decision that should have an impact. So I think you guys are both right. And again, some of that work is happening, particularly in the diversion subcommittee in terms of the development of recommendations specific to what we see in diversion and what diversion programs exist currently. But a lot of the rest of this, you know, requires just a little bit more information about where to start or where to even begin to make any sort of new decision that's going to have the impact. So we definitely need to get there. Definitely, we don't want to start asking, you know, questions. People get really sort of hung up on certain types of questions that don't matter a ton. How many windows are in the, you know, that might like, and I'm being funny, but like literally people say absurd things and want to know absurd sorts of things. We definitely don't want to get to that point. But something like what sorts of offense types are we talking about? What are the geographic locations? And we know some of that with young people. It's just a little difficult to quantify. But when we're talking about adult data that we don't really have a handle on yet, those are going to be huge in terms of determining what courses of action to take.
Chris, you know, the DOJ data does have the offense type. So we could break that down by offense type for each of the arrest, at least for the felony arrest categories.
Similarly, the Burns Institute is working on a statewide data tool that uses DOJ data. It's going to be something like, I think something that Clarence presented on before. So that we should be able to isolate some of this stuff. I just don't know exactly how long it's going to take for us to get it up and running. Certainly in the meantime, it's good to continue to use DOJ data as well as ask local agencies for it. But hopefully, you know, our tool is up and running soon, within the next few months, I guess, and we're able to sort of pull some of this stuff in-house.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody else on the committee have any comments, thoughts? Okay, Jill, I'm going to go back to you then.
Yeah, I was just gonna, I totally agree with everything Chris just said. The significance of the data, of course, as we all know, is you have to have baseline data to determine whether or not we're making changes with all the other things that we're doing with our GOB and the other advisory bodies that are working on these same issues. So if we don't have baseline data, we have nothing to compare it to going forward. So, you know, and having great conversations about what kind of data, how to collect it, how to get it is been taking up an enormous amount of time. As we all know, data systems in the county are challenging at best. As our departments get on board with their new data systems, we're hoping to ease that up. But what I was going to say was really, I think that if you filter, diminish, shrink the data that you share with the public, then the public is going to feel like you're hiding things from them. I think it's important to have all the data available that's been collected. I think it paints a picture. I think it reiterates. And I also think that the public has become quite savvy on these subjects. And so things like, you know, jury service and that sort of thing, people are aware of it. So if we don't have that data right now, that's okay. But maybe a footnote or an overview of here's the goals we're trying to reach for. We don't have all of that yet, but we're working on it. And because I think it all ties in together. And I think not including it makes this group look like they're not really facing the issues. And that would be my concern about not providing all the data.
Thanks, Jill. I think that's a really valid point. Obviously, we can't have a listening session with all that we have because it would be overwhelming, but we can certainly pick and choose and then direct individuals to other places. And as everybody's talked about, it won't be the last one. We'll do another one and see where the community wants to go from there and what, you know, their priorities are. So I think that's a great idea. Any other thoughts on this? I think what we want to do, from my interpretation of this discussion, is that we need to vote on whether or not we want to collaborate with the Community Engagement and Funding Subcommittee to develop listening sessions. And I would expect that would be a collaboration that would address questions such as who is going to lead this, who's going to prepare the data, things along those lines, as well as when it's going to take place. But does that sound about right, Chris, from where you left it with the CEF, that we would vote that we want to work together on this?
Sure, that sounds good to me. And I just say it that way because the CEF, sort of without taking a vote, they were all like, yeah, that sounds like the right thing to do. But certainly, you know, for formality's sake, if we need to take a vote, by all means.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but it seems like we could and we should, since we can. And so can I have a motion for working with the CEF in collaboration to conduct community listening sessions?
Well, I'll move it.
Thank you, Bill. Can I get somebody to second that?
I'll second.
Thank you, Shayla. Nicole, can we get a roll call vote, please?
Nick,
Sorry, yes.
thank you. Melissa,
Yes.
Denise,
Yes.
Dr. Walker,
Yes.
Shayla.
Sorry, yes, I was trying to take myself off mute. Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Great. So I see our next steps as that my hope is that everybody on this call will email Bisa and Tamisha with the request that they respond to our request to present and why, and share the passion. Next steps also include reworking based upon the recommendations that came forward surrounding the presentation. I will work with Patrice on that. I will also speak with her and Becky surrounding the possibility of, and basically the thought that we need to move to September for the mayor's conference in light of maybe BISA's schedule, as well as just our own getting things together. And then, you know, the next steps with regard to the community engagement and funding subcommittee. Chris, do you have any recommendations upon what that would look like? Do we need to have a joint meeting? What makes sense?
We may need to have a joint meeting at some point. I don't know if it needs to be right this second.
Okay.
And I just say that because the CEF, I mean, it would depend, I guess, on if folks had a date in mind or knew that, you know, the level of data, particularly, again, this sort of RJTF, you know, document full of data that they saw and said, wait, we need to do this. Like, we want to show community something like this. You know, we feel like we can get that. You know, I think as that takes shape, it makes more sense.
They're not asking us to obtain that, are they?
I think Jeff was saying that came from the county administrator's office. I don't think the question was for the data subcommittee to try to come up with it, but the question was, can we reach out to someone in the county administrator's office to try to get something that looks like that?
Okay.
Yeah, and it sounded like something Patrice was willing to take up, if I understand correctly, at least just to communicate and ask, you know, if that's something that could be done.
Okay.
I could be wrong on that. So I think that's the next step. Certainly I will be at the CEF subcommittee meeting to talk through sort of what happened here. And we can move forward that way. And definitely, I think in that conversation, we need to talk about how we might get both of these groups together to meet and hash out what should be shared,
right,
shared, and perhaps when.
Well, I think my thoughts about this would be that all of the data that this committee has shared is public domain data now. It's on the public, the agenda packets. So for the community engagement committee to look through those data points and maybe identify things that they want to put forward for a listening session and then for discussion with us. You know, over and over again, I know that, you know, probation wants to have a voice in the data that gets shared from probation. So knowing what it is that they want to have put forward for the listening session, we'll want to go through our process and getting that approved for this. But I think we could start with looking at what we have and seeing, do we have a story to tell with that?
Yep, sounds good to me. I can make sure that's on the agenda for the next the engagement and funding subcommittee meeting. And then from there, I think as they get some information from that and either say, we think it's good to start here, or we still want, you know, all the bells and whistles that we were really excited about, which they very well may, they were really excited about it. You know, figuring out what next steps are and when that actual meeting of the minds between the two subcommittees should happen, and or if maybe it happens at the next quarterly when everybody's going to be there, theoretically at least in the first place. So that sounds like a good next step for me, to put that on the agenda for them to discuss it and to figure out if the quarterly meeting is a good time to sort of convene both groups to have this discussion. And of course, diversion subcommittee will be there as well to, give their opinions naturally. But if we can do that, then maybe we can not shuffle people's schedules around too much.
Okay. And then the other thing that I have as a next step came from last meeting with Becky, that she wanted to see some kind of a flow chart or a map of data integration from various agencies. I prepared one several years, well, not several, maybe several years ago now. And she and I are going to be meeting about that next week. So that will likely be a topic on the agenda for next month. But that's all that I have. Does anybody have anything else for next step for next month? I think we've got our work cut out for us.
Yeah, indeed. Not so much a next step for me, more of an announcement that I will be out of the office for next month's meeting.
Okay.
Just wanted to let everyone know that, and thus, I can definitely take notes in terms of what comes out of the data. I mean, the CEF meeting.
Well, that would be great.
Read that and send them over to you all for review.
Okay, so you're out, and Nicole is also going to be out for next month's meeting. So good thing I have marching orders for the next steps. That's perfect. All right, everyone. If there's no, oh, sorry, Melissa, I'm just almost missed you there. Got it.
No problem. I just wanted to provide just a real quick update on our data that I talked about last week. So we've made some progress. I was hoping we would even be further by this meeting. I'm working with our technical service division on the report. It has been updated on our website to show 30 days worth of data. So that was one of the things we were trying to do. It originally showed only 10 days. It should, as of, I think just this morning, show 30 days worth of data. We have a very antiquated jail management system. So we're trying to run the report more frequently throughout the day to catch some of those quick booking releases that I mentioned last time. We're going to test it for several weeks to make sure that it doesn't create some kind of backlog or jam of our jail management system, but I anticipate that it should be fine. So we're going to continue to do that so that we have a more frequent update. And then lastly, I am working on a CSV version. We're getting close. It's not quite complete yet, but hopefully I will have an update next month on that as well. So we're moving along. We're moving at our typical slower pace sometimes through these things, but we are working on it, and I think we'll have it resolved with some usable data here very soon.
Great. That's really good news. Thank you so much for that update. And maybe we'll have data from your office to share too for this listening session. That would be fantastic.
Yeah,
that'd be great. Okay, if there's nothing else, anyone, I am going to adjourn our meeting at 4:34. Thank you, everyone. And don't forget to send those emails. Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Denise.